Welcome to our webinar on managing currency risk on your overseas property purchase. If you haven't had the pleasure of speaking to one of our team we've been helping our people buy and sell property overseas for over 25 years now. So that's a lot of clients we've helped that are in your exact position. I've personally been at the company for over 19 years. My name's Daniel Wright. My colleague here, Jonathan, who will introduce himself shortly, has been here for 16. Over that time, we've seen a great deal of market volatility, with the most notable being financial crisis, multiple general elections, Brexit, and the pandemic. So when it comes to this topic we're discussing today, we're both fairly well placed to talk you through how you can set yourself up best to avoid volatility catching you out. Jonathan, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is our webinar to explain how to manage the currency risk on your overseas purchase. It's a really important part because the actual exchange rate you get is what's going to determine the ultimate cost of your property. So getting that right really is crucial to understanding those costs. So thank you for joining the webinar. You will have the option to submit live questions. We've also had a number of questions submitted in advance, which Daniel and I will be running through. But yes, as Daniel says, been here many years, looked after tens of thousands of clients between us over the years, moving currency around the world for their overseas property transactions, and looking forward to sharing some of that insight and information with you today.
Perfect. And look, apologies we don't get to every question. We have had a lot more than we expected. So thank you for those that submitted them. What we will do is after the webinar in the next day or so, we'll make sure our team reach out to you just to have a chat through what your current situation is, and then we can answer those questions directly as well. So John, if you move on to the next slide, I think before we get onto the topic of currency planning, I think it's best if we just show you a little bit more about Lumon, the size of the operation, the trust and security really that we bring when helping you move your money overseas. I think as we've mentioned, we've now helped tens of thousands of people move money for property, and that's over 25 years. We've got a head office in the UK, multiple offices in Spain, Portugal and Ireland, and then we've got a fair few team members on the ground in France too. So Jonathan, just to let the audience really know the benefits of us without going through every single one, what would you say are the two key benefits of using Lumon over, say, a high street bank or another?
I think the main thing really has got to come down to pricing in terms of competitive rates that we can offer. We can demonstrate savings over the banks and other options. That's obviously crucial. Even a small difference in the rate on a large currency exchange, as we'll show you, can save you hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, euros, dollars, whatever you might be transferring. So really getting that competitive rate is very important, and not just for the purchase itself, but for the lifetime of the property. If you're going to be sending living costs, you might have renovation work, any costs you have, obviously getting a good rate is fundamental. But really the service as well, as we'll come on to explain, there's a lot of different options that we can offer with a currency purchase to help with the planning and timing of the currency exchange, of when you actually lock that rate in, and then also when you actually make your payments. So if you're looking at an overseas property purchase, it doesn't just happen in 24 hours, it can be many weeks, months. If you're looking at, say, France, you could be talking about a good 3, maybe even 4 months. In Spain, it's a bit faster, you're talking about a few weeks, but with exchange rates changing every single day, the ability to lock in a rate at some point in that process can be really, really valuable. So yeah, very much the service, giving people information on the market and the different options we can offer, plus those competitive rates, it really can go a long way.
Perfect. And look, we're going to get onto why currency planning is super important. Jonathan kind of touched on it there. But over the years, I've seen so many people that have put down a deposit on a property. Jonathan, if you don't mind flicking to the next slide, that'd be great. They put down a deposit on the property, they then kind of don't even look at the markets for a couple of months. And I've seen so many people over that period of time that have been caught out, whether there's been an unexpected rate movement, there's been something that's happened in the global financial markets that suddenly caught them on the blind side. And whereas they budgeted a certain amount for the property, when it actually comes to paying for it, it's a substantial amount more than they expected. Sometimes it can work the other way, so it's not always doom and gloom, and it is very much an ever-moving market. But with exchange rates, you literally see them move every second of every day. And a great example at the moment is with everything that's going on in and around the Middle East. things can happen at 3 o'clock in the morning with absolutely zero warning. You could suddenly wake up the next morning and that property overseas is costing £5,000 more than you expected. So it's really, really crucial that not necessarily you lock into a rate immediately and know exactly where you stand, but what you should have is a really experienced broker on your side to be the eyes and ears on the market. They can kind of give you an update on what's coming up, what's happened in recent months, and really help you to put together a plan as to how you want to address your property purchase and how you want to go about securing your rates over a period of time. Now, for different clients, it has different meanings. Some are a little bit more risk averse and they would like to just know, I put my deposit down, I want to know exactly how much that property is going to cost. Others prefer to ride the wave a little bit and think, well, actually, if I catch this at the right time, I might get it a little bit cheaper. But we're really here to give you as much information as possible as to what events are coming up, how they may have historically impacted exchange rates, and really our guidance, as it were, on what we feel is coming next. What we can't do, we cannot advise you. So fortunately, we don't even know what's coming tomorrow. But with the wealth of knowledge that both Jonathan and I and all of our traders have, we should be a really good set of people to have on your side. Jonathan, in terms of that, what events really do move exchange rates? Could you tell our audience what over the years have moved exchange rates the most, and what day to day can have an impact on these sort of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. I'll just really add, some of the points you're making there, why currency planning is important, as you mentioned, because it's what's going to determine the cost of the property. And like you say, if things do go the wrong way, it can be very expensive. I had a client last year, it was about this time last year, April, is when Mr. Trump had the trade tariff. It all first came to the headlines, and we had a client doing dollars into pounds, and the rate was starting to move against her. She's bringing some dollars from the United States. We did a forward contract, we'll explain more about that later, but allowed the client to fix the rate in advance. And we worked out by the time she was completing on her property later that year, she'd saved tens of thousands of dollars from fixing things in advance. And just like you said, we don't always know which way the rates are going to go, but a conversation early on to at least understand your options, it can prove really valuable. So what are those events that move rates? First thing is economic data. So every week we're getting new data. It could be inflation numbers, it could be GDP, gross domestic product numbers, unemployment, all of these economic figures. They're often in the news anyway, but they do affect rates. They do affect investors' attitudes towards the currency. Quite simply, if it's bad economic data, you might see the currency weaken, and vice versa. If it's good news coming out, you can see the pound or the euro, whatever currency you're selling, strengthen. So we can pinpoint these data points and let you know what's happening. The next 24 hours is such a good example. We've got a Bank of England meeting tomorrow. We've got the US interest rate decision this evening. These are major events in the market. So all of my clients who are ready to buy, who want to be kept up to date, I'll be letting them know the outcome of these decisions, and then they can decide what they want to do. So what events move exchange rates? It's economic data. It's the central bank interest rate decisions. As I say, we've got 3 meetings in the next 24 hours. Then we've got political and economic stability. Great examples recently, the Iran war, everything going on with Mr. Trump, pretty well documented. He has the power to move markets, never quite know what he's going to do or say next, and the market has reacted to that. And then you've also got market speculation, which can move rates. So this is really investors' attitudes towards currency. Sometimes there'll be a sort of sense in the market where a currency is particularly unfavorable. Let's take the pound for at the moment. Some of the economic data has not been quite as strong as you'd like. There's also some political uncertainty, so that in different conditions could see the pound a little bit unfavored. So again, it's market speculation. Investors might be betting against that currency, and it could be weaker as a result. So as Dan says, we'll highlight all of these different events going on to people to try and help them make their plans.
Perfect, thank you. And look, we've got a couple of examples, next few slides, on really what sort of movements you've seen over the last 12 months. It kind of just highlights exactly where we are sitting at the moment. So If we move on to next slide, for some reason it's not all showing up, but I can read it out for you. So 400,000 euros over the last 12 months, the actual monetary difference we've seen, as you can see on screen now, it's almost 19,000 pounds. So, I mean, the way I look at that, that's you buying a car when you purchase your property over there. It makes a huge difference catching this at the right time as opposed to the wrong time. Similar movements with dollars. I mean, we've seen nearly 5% movement for sterling into dollar. So if you are looking to buy in the US or any other area, say the UAE, which is directly pegged to the dollar, that has a huge impact as well. It could be all of your solicitors' fees. It could be even in some cases, depending on the volume of currency you're exchanging, an extra bedroom on your property. I mean, if we move on to the following slide, it actually gives you the same example over €1 million and $1 million. And those differences are massive. I think depending on your budget, it's all relevant. But I think if you're looking at a £46,000 difference on timing your currency from the best point to the worst point, it just shows the real importance of having someone like ourselves on your side. I mean, Jonathan shared a great example earlier on how catching the rate at the right time via a forward contract can be super helpful. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But what I wanted to mention as well is in and around the economic data, the political data that comes out over the course of each week, we'll have a QR code at the end. If you want to register for our services, we actually send out a weekly market update on a Monday, which will just explain what's coming out, what's happened over the previous few days, just give you a bit of insight in what's coming up. And we usually follow that up midweek with a market alert as to what we thought was coming out, how that's impacted the market, and what changes we've seen off the back of it. If you want to move on to the next slide, Jonathan. Jonathan's just going to explain a little bit about the timeline of recent events. And I mean, over the last 12 months, as we previously mentioned, there's been a huge amount of market movement. Johnny, just want to go through a few of the main sort of impacts that we've had over that period of time.
Yes, I mean, you can see there the changes in the market, and it just shows how difficult it is trying to predict these things. You're going to look at a good few weeks, potentially few months. Sometimes a property transaction is actually many months or years in actual planning. So trying to understand your costs in advance can be really helpful. You mentioned before, Dan, about us really having a conversation with the client, and there almost being two ways that you can approach this. So you can have a more defensive strategy where we'll perhaps look to lock in a rate a bit earlier on in the process, just so you understand your costs. You could be on a tight budget. You might not want to have any risk that rates could move against you, and you'd suddenly have to find an extra £5,000, £10,000, whatever it might be, to buy your property. So as I say, a more defensive strategy there would be to lock in a level a bit earlier in the process. Otherwise, if you are looking for rates to move a bit higher, and that can be quite common, a lot of people might pay their deposits and they say, well, look, Jonathan, I'm hopeful rates are going to go higher. Obviously, no one knows exactly what the rates are going to do next, but just keep me updated. And as we've explained, we can go through the market. We'll give you the updates every week, let you know what's going on, and then we can try and pinpoint these moments. You might buy half of your currency, you might buy 30% of it. You don't necessarily have to commit everything in one go. And that can actually work really well for some people, because you're buying 500,000 euros, you might buy 250,000 euros initially. So you then only got that last 250 actually at risk from market movements. And then if the rates go up, fantastic, you're able to get a better rate. But if it does drop, then okay, at least you bought something at that slightly higher rate. So just looking at that graph, very difficult to predict these things. We can see there a clear pattern with these interest rate decisions and sort of changes in sentiment there from economic data. That's why the next 24 hours are very important. Apologies for anyone watching this on a time delay, not live. The interest rate decision may well have passed then, but you're getting these interest rate decisions every sort of 6 weeks or so. You've got the Bank of England, that of course affects the pound. You've got the US Federal Reserve in the United States, that's affecting the dollar. Now the dollar, big movements on the dollar can actually impact the euro, the pound and other currencies. The US dollar accounts for about 60% of globally traded foreign exchange. And as the dollar is rising and falling, it really can push and pull rates in their own way. And then you've got the Eurozone, the European Central Bank. Again, you get these interest rate decisions, can move the market. And then, of course, we've got a few bits of political uncertainty there as well, which has a big impact. So there's always something going on. I think that's the point to point out. And just sort of hoping that rates are going to go your way or hoping it's going to be okay in a few weeks, that can be a risky strategy.
Yeah, I think the saying goes, hope doesn't move the markets, unfortunately. So it's just super important to be prepared, know that you've got someone on your side, and just to be also ultimately prepared to change your mind a little bit, because you may have a mindset and a budget on one particular rate of exchange. If the market does take a turn for the worse, there is no guarantee you'll ever get back to that level. So I think it's really important, just from our experiences, always to look forwards as opposed to looking back. I think over the years, I've had many a customer who's said, well, last week we were at 115, so I'm going to wait for 115 again. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee that we will go back to the levels that we saw last week. And I think the super important factor I want to have here is when you are looking to buy, look forwards and just make sure that, great example from Jonathan earlier, we've got the Federal Reserve tonight, the Bank of England tomorrow. There's no like expectations of huge movements off the back of that, but you never know, because the central banks are there to surprise us sometimes, and even just the smallest change in the voting pattern can make a big difference in terms of the exchange rate. So I think, again, super key to think about the options and solutions that we have, which we'll touch on in a couple of slides time, because there are ways that you can protect yourself without fully committing. And we have multiple options to be able to do that, to try and help you sort of get around the adverse market movements. If you want to flick onto the next slide, it's really one we'll touch on quickly, but ultimately we have, as mentioned right at the start of this, seen a huge amount of volatility over the time that we've been at this business alone, and the business has been around a little bit longer than us. So I think one key takeaway here is that Lumon has remained stable throughout all of this volatility, and you have got a safe pair of hands with you if you are looking to purchase. You do want to speak with us. I mean, Jonathan, just want to talk about the slide and like your experience over those years, and how we've really helped the larger impacting situations not impact our customers too much.
Absolutely, yeah. Like we said, the service is very much here to help you control the cost of your property against the volatility that we can see. And it's sometimes tempting to look at what's happening in the last year or the last 6 months and think, oh, it's a particularly volatile time and particularly excessive. But actually, as that graph clearly shows, you know, volatility is always there, and it's been that way forever, if you like, in the currency markets. There's always something going on. You do get periods of calm and quiet, but you absolutely, there's always you know, an election around the corner or a change in the interest rates. Just for anyone who's unaware, we keep talking about interest rates. Typically speaking, if they're lowering interest rates, you'll often see that in the news, that can lead to a weaker currency because it makes that currency less attractive to hold, a bit like a bank account. If you lower the interest rate, people might look for another higher interest rate somewhere else. And again, if it's a higher interest rate from these central banks, that can sometimes strengthen the currency. As always with exchange rates, there's no sort of absolute guarantees there. We had on the previous slide about those interest rate decisions and how sometimes the rates are going up, sometimes they're going down. But that's just for anyone who wasn't aware, a very loose pattern. And actually quite a good example of some of the information that we can provide you with, just to really help understand the markets and what's going on. Like Dan said, we can't tell you precisely what to do. Dan and I don't know. No one on this planet can tell you exactly what exchange rates are going to do. And that's because no one knows. The rate is just a reaction to what is happening globally. And as current events with Mr. Trump and Iran, etc., show, there is no sometimes clear pattern, but we can certainly help you to understand the markets. We can give you these different contract types, and then at least you've got a bit more sort of ammunition to help you try and navigate things. So I'll come on to the next slide for you there, Dan.
Thank you. So look, we do a great deal of research and insight into even the experts, like Jonathan mentioned. They don't fully know what's coming next, and you'll see that in the multitude of predictions we get and the wide array of expectations across the professionals. But what we try and do here is we'll research that part so you don't have to. So ultimately, we'll look at the top banks, we'll look at the top the top banks and the top analysts and what they feel is coming next, and we'll try and put together a bit of a thought around what the mean looks like, what the highest is looking like, and where the lowest sits. And just give you that information so you've got an understanding, right? at the moment, for example, Credit Agricole are expecting sterling euro to hit 119 in the next 12 months. However, flip that around and you may well have Barclays who are expecting 113 as an example. So that really just shows the array and the difference in expectations even by the professionals. But what we will do is we will put all that information together, give you our thoughts on it, and then ultimately you can make a really good decision. So Jonathan, you use this data very regularly. I'll let you talk to it a little bit and just explain to the audience kind of what your thoughts are on the above on the slide.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think this data is so helpful because it gives you a range of where rates are being forecast, as you can see clearly from the different banks out there. So it gives us that range. It gives you a sort of area to focus on. But it also just demonstrates how, precisely as you said, these experts, so-called experts, well, no, they are experts in their own little way. You know, they're coming up with this data. There's huge demand for data, for forecasts, for research, but actually even, say, the experts don't know. They can't agree on what's going to happen. So it's almost quite a reassuring thing because it just shows that no one can predict it. So that's why it's so important to just understand your own position, understand your budget, what's realistic, and we'll share probabilities of rates hitting certain points. So that data, I just find it really insightful to share with clients. And it's just to give some almost color to the picture of the whole exchange rate landscape, just to try and see where rates could be headed, what are the highs, what are the lows, what could they expect. And again, it just reinforces that no one knows precisely what's going to happen next. So it's generally really well received. This data isn't sort of always freely available. We update it regularly as well through our contacts and network, and it's just very useful information. We can share more sort of detailed research around some of these important decisions as well. For example, the Bank of England decision on where voting at the Bank of England, you have certain members who vote whether to raise or lower interest rates or keep them on hold, and we can share all this sort of information with clients. Some of it's freely available anyway, but we can just really tailor it towards your position, your currency transaction, and just try and give you a bit more information to make those decisions.
Brilliant, thanks Jonathan. And look, I think we can flick on to the next slide. We have a variety of options that should be able to help you if you are either in the process of purchasing a property or you're considering purchasing a property. And what we won't do is go through every single one now, because I think some of the questions we had will actually direct us to discuss a couple of these options. I mean, I'll touch on two whilst we're on the slide. So I think probably one of the most important is a limit order. So if, for example, you have budgeted a particular rate of exchange and it's not quite there yet, let's say an exact throwaway example of 115 buying euros, you can actually place an order into the market, and if that rate gets achievable, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, that rate will be automatically purchased for you. We would then contact you the next day to say, great news, we've achieved your 115, as an example rate, because it's probably there at the moment, but we've achieved your 115, we would just now need you to settle in the next couple of working days. And ultimately, it kind of works in the market as an automated robot for you. If you know that if you could hit that rate of exchange, you would want to buy straight away. On the flip side of that, you've got what's known as a stop loss. So if you cannot afford or do not want to go any lower than a particular rate of exchange, let's just pluck an example out of 112, you can actually place a stop loss into the market. And should the rate suddenly take a turn for the worst, again, during the course of a trading day, or even at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, as soon as we hit that price for you as an actual buying price, that currency would be bought automatically. We would then contact you the next day just to say, right, great news, or in this case, not so great news, your currency has been purchased, and even though the rate has gone lower, you've achieved the price that you officially wanted. So they're two really good options if you're working to a specific level that you really want, because it just means you don't have to watch the market all day, every day. And even you don't need to be available on the phone. If we spot a price is available, it will just be bought automatically in the market. Jonathan, did you want to flick onto the next slide? And we'll go through a couple of the questions, because I think it will bring us back around to the solutions again. So yes, thank you for those that have put questions on during the chat. And thank you to those that actually put the questions in advance. So I've picked a couple, and Jonathan, I'll pose them to you, and we might want to flick back onto the solution slide as we go. The first question is from Nick. Is it possible to open a French bank account while still a resident in the UK?
Yes, it is. We have some connections to allow French bank to be opened earlier on in the process. Some French banks might require you to actually have an address in France, so you may need to be completely on the property. But before you're even getting to that point, you can actually use the Lumon wallet. Now, this is really, really important. So first step, as Dan had mentioned, is to register. There is a link there to do that. Once you've done a very simple identity check and the account set up, we're talking minutes here, you then have immediate access to a wallet in pounds, in euros, whatever currencies you need to trade. Now you can actually use the Lumon wallet, and I'll just go back on the slide to come back to some of the different options there. But yes, the e-wallet, it allows you basically to purchase currency, and you can really use this almost like it's a bank account. Technically, it's not your own bank account. It's what's known as a segregated client account, very similar to a solicitor, other professions who will hold money on behalf of their clients. But you can use this account for any payments you need to make. So if you're paying the notaire to send your deposit, if you're buying in Spain and you need to send the notary a deposit, you can use the wallet to do that. One thing is, just to come on quickly, you've got to be thinking of something else. Other benefits of us, it's really our local banking connections as well. So we guarantee no receiving charges in those countries. So we have local bank accounts across Europe, and we route a lot of our payments through them to ensure no banking charges. That can be something you do need to watch out for with international transfers. There can be hidden bank fees, hidden charges. It's not always totally clear. But working with a specialist like ourselves, as I say, we can guarantee there's no receiving fees when you make that payment. So in answer to the question, you can get yourself registered with Lumon. You've got this e-wallet that you can use to make your immediate payments. And then we can actually introduce you to help you set up a French bank account as well. You might need that down the line for living costs and things like this. But yes, for those early payments, you can use the wallet. You don't have to have a Euro bank account to open a payment solution to France, Spain, wherever you're buying. You can just use the Lumon account, and it's generally much simpler and quicker to do that.
Right, brilliant. And we have 2 more questions. We have 2 more minutes, so we may be a minute or 2 over. But so does it make sense to lock in a forward contract for a deposit that we converted from sterling into euro? Thank you to Taylor for bringing that question across.
Thank you, Taylor. I would ask, what is your budget? You know, does it make sense? It absolutely does, because you're going to get total peace of mind and clarity of the rate that you're getting. There's no risk that rates are going to become more expensive. And for you, that might suit you perfectly. For someone else, they might say, well, actually, I'm really hoping that rates are going to go up. I don't want to be tied into a certain level. In that case, perhaps the forward contract wouldn't be suitable, but there is a risk that rates fall and things become more expensive. On the previous slides where we were showing the trend on pound-euro levels, eagle-eyed of you may have noticed a slight bias towards a weaker pound over the coming months from the average of these different forecasts that we see. And if that was to ring true, that would mean that potentially a property purchase could get more expensive. So yeah, there's clear benefits with the forwards. You know what you're going to be paying, but you are giving up the potential for a higher rate if that happens.
I think just to touch on the forward contracts, it is probably one of our most popular contract options, especially for those buying property, because ultimately you can secure the whole price of your property in advance with just paying a small deposit. So if, for example, there is a fear that, for example, we have local elections coming up, that could bring into question Keir Starmer and what his position is, which ultimately could lead to sterling weakness. If you're concerned around that, but you've just committed to buy a property, that forward contract option can really come into play, where you could lock into a rate for anything up to a year in advance. You pay a small deposit, but you just know exactly how much those euros, for example, are going to cost you in pounds and pence. So no matter what happens to the market in the coming months, you have secured your rate. You know that your property, which is worth 300,000 euros, is costing you exactly X amount in pounds. So
just add in there, Daniel, very quickly with the forward contract, it's perfect. We do see this a lot. If people are selling a property, say in the UK or in the US, and then buying in France, Spain, if that's the way they're doing things, you can use the forward contract to guarantee the receiving amounts value. So you're selling a property, say in 2 months in the UK, you don't have those pounds yet. You could use the forward contract to lock in the rate, so there's no risk of it moving against you.
Yeah, it's a brilliant option. As again, it's each individual has their own opinion on these things, and I think if you're risk averse, if you like to know where you stand, then forward contracts is definitely worth discussion. And as I mentioned before, the QR code we'll flip back to at the end. Click on that. You can register with us for a free account. We can have a discussion about it, and if you feel it's suitable to you, then by all means we can look into some options for you. So final question, and then we better wrap up because we're slightly over time. We do like to talk. It's from Samantha. So Samantha, how do I manage renovation expenses after I purchase the property? Jonathan, do you want to fire away?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. So we've got a number of solutions to help with your ongoing costs. We did mention that on the first intro. It's not just a one-off transaction. We're here to help with all your ongoing costs. So you can set up regular payments, automated payments, where each day or week, whenever you transfer money through, it automatically gets credited into an overseas account. You can do online trading yourself. Once we've guided you through the markets and you're feeling a bit more comfortable about everything, you can just log in when you want to and do a really simple, easy online trade. Or we always pride ourselves on a telephone-based service, so we can give you that information on the market. So with those renovation costs, we can just keep you up to date as we do, and then we can do those trades over the phone. You can have a chat with the specialist about what's going on in the market, what could happen, and then it's up to you. So really, just like any transaction, you just let us know what you're thinking of doing. We can tell you what's going on in the market, tell you the different options, and then it's up to you how you want to proceed.
Brilliant, thank you, Jonathan. Well, I think off the back of that, the one thing we do here at Lumon is we have the options. So Jonathan touched on it brilliantly. If you prefer to use technology and not to speak to someone once you've kind of got to the point where you're doing smaller bits and pieces, we've got an online platform that's brilliant. If you prefer to pick up the phone and know, I just want to have a brief chat around the market once a month, once a quarter, once every 6 months, we'll still speak to anyone on the phone, no matter what volume they're doing. So we try and tailor our service for every single person out there, and hopefully you'll find it's of great use if you do get in contact. So I'd like to wrap up. So look, thank you very much, Jonathan. You've been really insightful, and hopefully the audience has found this particular webinar of use. As mentioned, we will reach out to those who've registered. We're more than happy to have a chat about your particular situation. Again, we can highlight options that may be of best use to you, and we can answer any other questions or queries you may well have. Given our experience, we know the pitfalls to avoid when you're buying property in most countries, and we'll be more than happy to have a chat with anyone that wishes to speak to us at any point in the coming days, weeks or months. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to the audience, and we hope you found it of use. Cheers.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.